Like having gone through the what am I going to do in Web3, but I know I want to be here carousel in my own career. You know, the natural tendency for someone that has degened on NFTs or degened in
Yeah.
DeFi for a long time is like, I can be a community manager. You guys should totally set up a Discord, and then you should totally launch an NFT, and then you should launch more NFTs, and you're gonna have all this extra revenue, and like that's
Yeah.
taking from someone who's never done strategy consulting for a business before.
Yeah.
And it was okay at that point for them because they're like, oh, you have this many NFTs and you've done this, and Web3 is hot right now. Well, now that Web3 is not hot, right? You're starting to realize that you've got to take a step backwards and
Yeah.
start to trust the people who have built out this stuff before.
Yeah. And community management is not, I go in the Discord and I say GM. Like that is not, community management is thinking about like, what does this community need? What are the systems? What are the tools? What are the things that are going to be meaningful to them? Like what are the kind of events, or what is the like, what do we want to create to get, like all of those things, like that's community management. And I think for some reason it became, I manage the Discord and therefore like I moderate or whatever. But like, no, like community management also is like not the responsibility of a single person. You can have definitely people like own it, right? And like own parts of it. But like we as community members are also community managers. And like we need to take that accountability on ourselves to, in order to have like thriving communities. Like if I'm just like, let me let someone else handle this. Like, no, when you're in an actual community, it's based on mutuality and trust, and I contribute things, I receive, I give, I take, like that's community. And so there's no manager. Like maybe there are certain people who are responsible for certain things, but when you think about how communities are structured, like real communities, like you don't have someone who's responsible for saying hello to everyone every day. Like no, that's everyone's responsibility. Like, and I think like, I don't know when that happened, that it was like, we need like these people to be like, they're like fire starters at like a bar mitzvah,
Hype man. Go,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
go.
Like,
You
no,
got
we
cold
don't need
sparks.
that. We don't need that. If we're trying to build like a true community here, that's not authentic. So I don't know. That's
I
another.
love that analogy by the way. Like we don't need the people with sparklers and bottles at Las Vegas Cabanas as our community managers.
Yeah. I
Right?
mean, you can have that person, but like, let's call them that,
Yeah.
they're the hype man, and like,
Yeah.
let's call it that because then people get it. Like, that's not like, I think we just need to be more realistic about the roles and responsibilities on the actual members of the community. Like, we are all responsible for community management in the same way that like, we are all also responsible for shilling. Like, if you decentralize shilling, it's just literally me telling you about a thing that I'm excited about, which is so powerful. Like
Word of mouth marketing.
it is. And word of mouth marketing, like that was like what made social media so cool. But then it became, we put a price on it. But we've got an opportunity in Web3. Like you don't need a price on it because you're a token holder. So like you're incentivized to market already. And that built-in incentive is really powerful. And really, I think what's going to disrupt, or is already disrupting, traditional social media marketing or performance marketing. Because like, yeah, like there's an incentive for me to talk about this stuff because I'm a contributor and I'm an owner, and that's really revolutionary.
How do you distinguish though? Because coming from I think all of this was born out of NFT communities, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
which we needed to pave the way. I get it, to realize the power of co-creation and building a community and stuff like that. But like when I was in Deadfellas and I was gung ho on Deadfellas and it was, worth whatever, 4 ETH or whatever, I was all like posting on there, Deadfellas is the best. I got GM, like boom, boom, boom. Here's my fellas. This is my favorite fella. Da, 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 da. Now, when I see people do that, I cringe.
Yeah, well, I was kind of always cringing. I was fascinated by what was happening. I was like, this is ridiculous. This photo of this ape. Like, I was never into NFTs. NFT, and like people are like, now they're like the word utility is like, whatever, but like, no, like it's not utility. It's like you're part of a community. What can we do together? What can we create? Shilling for the purposes of just driving up your token price, like, or your NFT floor, like that is not what I mean. I mean, like, you are excited about what you're doing with this community, what you guys are co-creating. And I think those people like aped into things based off of the price, and like a roadmap that might not have been like fully baked. Again, like it's funny, like you had a manifesto and a roadmap and like a bunch of money. And then it's funny, like at Gitcoin, we talk about this a lot because it became really easy to raise funds and then really hard to figure out how to distribute them based off of like how these communities were created. So, and then prices just went, just plummeted. And so then treasury, like it created like a lot of challenges for these communities to like build something like sustainable. But also like you recruited a bunch of community members on like the basis of what? And so I think that's again why like kind of like vision and strategy become really important, both of them, because vision is one thing, but if you don't have like a plan for how to get there, that's like actually realistic, and doesn't rely. And I think, again, I'm not like hating on we needed them to pave the way. I totally agree with that. But I think when you look back at like what a lot of those roadmaps were, but also like what the incentives were, like the incentives were kind of like they were very heavy on things that like, were probably not sustainable in terms of like cultivating real community and making money, or like reinvesting. Like I think I look at what Nouns is doing now, and it's really interesting. Although I have like I see the both sides, like the good and the bad of Nouns, but like they've created this like sustainable, like this flywheel of just like this like proliferation that also consistently means like recurring funds coming in. I think how they allocate those funds, and also like the makeup of that community, right? Given the floor price, I think there are definitely like some drawbacks, but I think like there's a mechanism there that that creates longevity. And I think, they definitely have like, it's the community is certainly like creating things, and like they've got this community that's like actively like in pursuit of like proliferating the meme, and like it all kind of ties together for me in terms of like what they say they're doing and what they're doing, and I think a lot of that was like lost with these NFT projects because they didn't really know what they didn't know. No one knew, and so I think I think there's a novelty to it, and there are certain projects that will always have that, right? Being the first, but like in terms of like what they're becoming, I think like we can only have so many that are trying to be the next like Disney or something, or the next like like the next Jam City, the next major gaming company, and I think they're. I don't really know what the internal makeup or decision-making rights or like how those organizations are actually structured. But I certainly know the DAOs that I'm a part of, like we decide on things together, and like we are also like working as like teams, and it's really hard, but like
So switching gears to the community side, I know you've done a lot of deep thinking about what it takes to be a community, and from our first conversation, I realized that it has to start on a very small scale, right?
mm-hmm.
And start with maybe 4 or 5 people almost that are dedicated to this. And as you talked about community earlier in this conversation, my label that came up was the kind of intentional empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And that like everybody wants to be a part of a community and they don't necessarily know how to contribute. So you've kind of got to build the rails for people that contribute in different ways. And by the way, that's not just marketing, sales, dev, whatever. It's like a good example for me is like, I'm not big on hopping in Discords and just talking about things, but I'm huge at being like, hey, you want to hop on a call? Let's chat. Right.
Yeah.
So how do you think about community and building solid communities from the foundation up? And then how do you think about that idea of kind of intentional empowerment?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like a lot of communities do start with like, you know, a couple of people. I know, I mean, I started a women's, my friend and I started a women's community here in New York. And it literally started with like, I would meet different women in emerging tech. And we would be like, oh, like they'd be like, want to grab coffee? And I just finally was like, I put them all in a group chat and I was like, all of you come to my house. Like, when can you come? And let's like have let's just hang out. And like,
love it.
It's called Her House. And like, that's what it has just become because it started like at my house. And it's a bunch of women, but like, there's that. And then it's like, okay, people like, people don't even oftentimes know what they're really good at contributing. So like, think about that. They don't even know. And then also you're just leaving it open-ended for them. So they're like, shit, like, I don't even know what I could contribute.
It's like you're building self-awareness.
I know what I'm good at, but like, I don't know what you need and I don't know what I'm good. So like, you get a lot of people maybe in a Discord who are just sitting ducks. And so I think you have to kind of create opportunities, but also you have to create some, like, again, it comes back to like structure and like, you know, you can't like architect a community. I think it does evolve on its own. And you can't be like, we need this person for this, like when you're just in those early stages of building. So it's hard, but I think it's about like communication. And so I think the most important thing is making sure that your community has the right tools for communicating with each other. And Discord, I think, expecting everyone to sit in a Discord is, how luxurious is that? Who has the time? I mean, I do because I work for DAOs, but like, no. And so I actually end up not participating in a lot of communities that I would love to participate in because they're only on Discord. And I only sit in Discord if someo's paying me to sit in Discord.
I was going to say it. I'm glad you did.
Like, come on. I don't like it. I don't like the interface. I think it's crazy that anyway, a lot of things, but like, what is that? What are those other touch points? Is it IRL events? I think local events are really important, creating space for people to come and like organically connect. I also think like smaller group chats. I think like, I find Telegram overwhelming, but like, it's a reality of Web3. It's another platform that if you're personally contacting me on there, or if you're like a hobby community, like, or social community, I won't tune in and I'm there for work, you know? So I think that it's very different for every single person. So you need to like really, as you're building, you need to get to know what works for people. And then I think you need to like also like give them something that they can like get excited about, not just a vision, but like specific things that are happening. And you have to like kind of transparently communicate, and you have to create opportunities for people to see themselves in the work. And so I think, you know, as you get to know your community, also like, what are we building? Maybe thinking about how people can fit into it and like what people are good at as you learn. So I think it's like a blend again of like creating like very intentional like tooling, as well as like touch points, right? Like regular, like you want to keep momentum going. So you need regular touch points. And then enabling co-creation. And that doesn't mean like a call for someone to like do a task. It means like hey, I'm thinking about this thing. Anyone want to like jam on this? And like, I think like this idea of like a jam session with like intentional outcomes, like, I think that's also like really powerful when it comes to like co-creating. And so it starts with that. It starts with like co-building something together and then creating those continuous touch points where you can continuously co-create. I think that's very important. And then it becomes about like, okay, oftentimes, okay, then we're building a product. So like, how do we structure incentives around that? And then how does ownership come into this? And then ownership starts to follow as you're building that community, because people want to know that their work is being valued. And I think honestly, like more DAOs need to think about compensation more intentionally, because to expect people to work for free indefinitely is just, especially like right now, yes, people will do it. They will. People will work for free, but you're also going to immediately cut out a bunch of people who won't, and that's going to suck for you. But also, like, why are we expecting people to work for free? Like, that's just shit, you know? So I think like getting real about that. And if it is about like shared ownership, then be super transparent about the timelines and like stick to them, because otherwise you're kind of, you know, screwing people over. So I think like paid community is very different. That's if you're shaping, like if you're building something for a product. Organic community can still exist unpaid, but I think you need to know which one you're playing in, and be really real about that.
It makes a lot of sense. I keep thinking about how some communities will make a habit of giving an announcement for someone that came up with a really good idea that changed the way that they were structured, or an initiative, or added a new channel, which I think is a good start.
Yeah.
But is it sustainable? I don't know. Right.
Yeah.
How do you keep that person that has the good idea coming back again and again and again? I've fallen victim to it myself, where I'm just like, well, that was fun, but now I've got this other thing I'm doing right now, and it doesn't involve being in your Discord for free.
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, when we move away from being a capitalist society, whenever that happens, maybe this can all, like, we can barter things. I don't know. We can compensate each other, but like, until that is a reality, like, I think we just need to get a little bit more real about that. And like, and yeah, like what does it look like when you're just there hanging out versus you're there to actually, like, if you're there to hang, if you're there for the vibes and it's not about like shipping product and you're not trying to monetize, then that's very different from like, no, we're actually trying. So like our Her House community, there's no compensation, there's no fee. We actually like will have like a gate for membership, but like it's just there, and like we're not trying to build products. So like there's no money here. So that's very different from like, no, we're trying to ship. And then you got to like think about your community very differently. And your community essentially is your contributors, and contributors should tie to compensation. I think Gitcoin has done an amazing job at that for the DAO, but then thinking about wider community, right? Because there are rings of community, right? There's not just your contributors. How do we keep them engaged? And they're not doing things though. They're not building stuff. They're just they are either users, or they're an audience, or they're people who are passionate about it. They might be token holders. Like, again, though, that comes back to like incentives. And I think incentive structures like at different layers or levels of community are really important to think about, because like compensation is one incentive, but then there are many others, and figuring out which ones work for which layers, and like which, or maybe not layers. I think there can be layers, but then there's also like a pod model of communities where it's like, I'm in this sort of sub community, but I'm also in this one. And like this one's doing one thing and this one's doing a different thing.